Hey guys, how are we doing? It's Martin Cliffe here with another My Guitars update. And this is possibly the cheapest bass I've owned, certainly as an adult. It is a Sire Marcus Miller M2 second edition in the trans blue finish with the maple board. Got this over the summer. And I got this basically because I wanted a bass with high C 5-string tuning, so rather than being B, E, A, D, G, it is E, A, D, G, and C. Basically the upper 5 strings of a 6-string bass. Now you don't have to tune it like that at all, but that is how I've chosen to do it. It's what works best for what I want personally. Obviously I have my little 5-string bass for the low B stuff, and the eagle-eyed amongst you may notice there's a little bit of metal sticking up here, which is a Hipshot D tuner, so I can still get that low D on that low string. Now on a 5-string I wouldn't necessarily want to drop that to A, but on with the high C instead, it gives me the flexibility of getting that low D. My reason for doing so is actually because this is certainly the least perfect instrument I've ever bought. So the fret ends were quite sharp in places, so I had to get a fret end file and file down. Most of them, some were much worse than others. A couple are still a little bit on the edge, but they're okay. They're certainly a hell of a lot better than they were. One of the tuners, actually the third tuner on the headstock, it's just about in shot, was really terrible. So because I was decided to put the Hipshot on, I moved the tuner from the low string to that one because they're all the same, and got rid of this one, which is just really badly machined. It's one of the problems with these knockoff Goto tuners, is that some are good, some are not so good, and this one was particularly bad. Just really wobbly, not very secure at all, not an impressive bit of kit. So the proper Goto tuner that comes with the Hipshot is a much better option. And would I have done that had it not been for the bad tuner? I'm not sure, but it definitely adds to the usability of the bass. Not entirely sure what it's made out of. It's got a kind of transparent finish. It's got a weird kind of fake binding where there's an area with no paint, just the lacquer, but it's not really a top so much as just a veneer on it. So it looks a little bit odd, but it's okay. It plays nicely now I've fixed it. There was another issue where, because it's got 2 dual concentric pots, and the way that they were on meant that you turned one and the other one moved as well. So you turn the inner one and the outer one would turn, or turn the outer one and the inner one would turn. Relatively simple job of just using an Allen key to undo the nut, pushing down the ring one a little bit, putting a little bit of lubrication. I used petroleum jelly or something, just a very tiny little bit of Vaseline just on a Q-tip, just to keep them separated. You could potentially use WD-40 as well, but the problem with that is it does evaporate more readily. And then just not pushing down the top knot quite as far, and now they're pretty much okay for turning. It's not the best design in the world, but it works for being a really cheap bass. So it's got a master volume, a master tone, which is particularly useful in passive mode. Pickup pan, it's got 2 unbranded humbucker pickups that are okay. Then bass mid with a mid sweep, and treble, and then a active or passive switch. Again, very useful for saving your battery, and it means you can set up 2 different tones and switch between them with having the dedicated tone control that works all the time, as well as the 3-band EQ. Yeah, I used it at church yesterday. It is my lightest bass. It's still not light because no 5-string basses and not many basses are lightweight, but it is, I think, under £8. I did make a note of that. Yeah, so 7.95 pounds or 3.61 kilos. So definitely the lightest, definitely the cheapest, definitely the one that needed the most work doing on it to make it comfortably playable. The intonation was not great. Generally the fit and finish, I think, is where they cut corners on these things. I say the bad tuner, the knob placement was not quite right. There was a random red mark on one of the frets on the, not actually on the fret but on the fingerboard, that again I had to just kind of sand off with some very fine grade sandpaper because I couldn't get it off any other way. So it just needed a bit of work doing to it. It obviously came strong normally with probably what, 45 to 130s or whatever. So and I think the action was quite high. I did have to take down the nut a little bit, but now it's set up and for relatively little outlay it does what I need it to and sounds pretty decent. I like a fairly aggressive tone on bass and it does that nicely. So that's active mode with everything flat. Passive mode again is pretty similar, and then if I roll, I'll turn off the overdrive while I talk about the tone controls. So obviously when it's in passive mode, none of these knobs do anything, but that means that I can turn up the bass and then switch to active. And that one doesn't do it a whole lot, but that must be the treble. So this must be the bass, because that's now quite thin and weedy. Add in the boost, quite meaty, and then can switch back to passive mode. Yeah, it just works. It's simple enough. And then the mid control. Or cut. Very hollow sounding, and then you can sweep that in either position. So yeah, pretty versatile, and then a pickup pan between the neck and the bridge. And the mid position. So that treble control really comes into its own when you're playing the really high up stuff. Particularly if you add a bit of overdrive to that. So pretty powerful EQ, as with most basses. I find that most of the time so far I'm leaving things pretty flat and then just tweaking a little bit to taste. It seems to be what works best on most instruments, if I'm fair. Passive mode is useful for saving your battery when you're plugged in at a gig. You don't need to unplug the bass. You can just flick it to passive mode and it should preserve your battery life. Obviously unplugging it long term is definitely better, but you know, having that ability, unlike my Yamaha basses which don't have a passive mode at all, so when your battery goes flat you are scuppered. Yeah, so not a bad instrument for the money. It was very cheap. It was like 3,000 Hong Kong dollars or something, but for the money it's very good. Just be prepared if you do buy one that you may need to give it a little bit of TLC, a little bit of work, or take it to a shop to get set up. But definitely, you know, it's for 1/10 of the price of my mic Lull. It's a hell of a lot more than 1/10 of the bass for the money. So yeah, something if you're on the market for a affordable 5-string, maybe you're mostly a 4-string player and you just want to dip your toe into the 5-string waters, it's a good option for that. It's a 35-inch scale, so the string tension is good. Or if, like me, you want to experiment, even if you have other 5-string basses, with high C tuning, but you don't really want to deal with 6-string basses, again, it's another good option for that too, or just as a backup. So thanks for watching, guys. Until the next one, take care, and I will speak to you soon.